Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the third chapter of this day of the AgriBusiness Forum. I would like to congratulate Mr. Balakakis again for putting together this wonderful event, addressing a series of topics that are always timely and of international interest. The agenda discussed today and tomorrow throughout the 2 days of the conference is the agenda that will shape the financial and political developments all around the world in the upcoming years. In this chapter, focusing on the supply chain, we're welcoming Mr. Michalis Katrinis, who is the head of PASOK-KINAL Parliamentary Group, Mr. Georgios Karakatsanis, who is a natural resource environmental economist, Mr. Dimitrios Vlachos, who is professor of logistics and supply chain management at the Aristotle University. This topic is critical in the essence of that supply chain and logistics have been shaken to the bottom by the pandemic, and we know that the current geopolitical crisis with the war in Ukraine has further exacerbated the problem, and the supply chain disruption has disorganized the circulation of commodities all around the world. This has also had an impact on the cost that affects the entire chain. This now leads to such an extensive crisis that also has societal repercussions. Let's start with no further ado, and then we will also take questions. Mr. Katrinis, you have the floor first. So, dear organizers, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank Yannis Balakakis for extending this invitation, having thus the opportunity to address you in this context. We know that the future of manufacturing is a key issue and a major point of interest for PASOK. The consecutive crises we have gone through normally should have made us, and by us I mean both the citizens, politicians, the state, the government, political parties, more cautious and more foresighted. However, the crises such as the pandemic, the climate change, the environmental destructions and the war that is still raging in Ukraine have further deteriorated the situation. We should have been more cautious because all these things are inextricably linked to the food and supply chain, energy, health, as well as the natural resources management, meaning our survival. In fact, all those crises have come to remind us of our limits, the limits that we have as societies, financial systems, healthcare systems, states, and national organizations. We have realized it is now time and imperative need to establish new bodies and organizations, because during the crisis we have witnessed the development of a food nationalist movement, meaning that exports have reduced in order to ensure the food security of their country. No one could have seen that coming, and yet it has come. This is also attested by today's meeting of Mr. Lavrov and the G20 meeting just before the conclusion of the agreement for the export of the Ukrainian grain and cereals. So those crises have come to remind us of the role undertaken by the state, because the state should be there to guarantee social cohesion, environmental protection. Sustainability, in other words. Sustainability aiming at ensuring the best financial results both for people and the environment. Something that relies on three pillars: society, economy, and the environment. This is why it is combined with circular economy and renewable energy sources. So we talk about the new economic model that reduces waste, limits the need for more resources to be consumed, and also upgrades the sustainability of the system through more efficient use of the resources. The various actions and interventions for environmental protection aim at ensuring this shift towards a greener and circular farming that is resilient to crisis with low environmental footprint. This marks the reorientation of the production model, thus redefining the future of the farmers and producers themselves as well as of the rural areas. This is a new framework aspiring at ensuring that this transition will happen in a just, fair, safe, transparent, sustainable and balanced way, under terms that can guarantee the food sufficiency and food security of the European Union, the production of top quality and high nutritional value products, the involvement of all the links of the supply chain, as well as all the inhabitants of rural areas. Transition to a circular economy can, according to estimates, produce a clear and net profit of up to 1.8 trillion euro by 2030 and yield up to 1 million new jobs in the continent of Europe. The security of the supply chain, as has already been seen in an EY survey, has become a key priority for businesses and is linked with the overall life cycle of products and services, the proper management of climate impact, as well as the integration of principles of sustainability. We know that this is a difficult issue because we know that the pressure that's been exerted on transportation has affected has brought about its repercussions on the financial aspects of the system. So ports management, roads management is something that needs to be addressed. Besides, in a globalized world where there is increasing concern about the health and hygiene of employees, shortage of raw materials, as well as environmental distractions, and they come one after the other, sustainability is considered to be one of the key criteria for the evaluation of suppliers and producers. Performance in terms of sustainability are even more important, and they are equally important factors with the quality and cost ratio of the products, the speed of response of the supply chain. And of course, all those things vary depending on the geographical area and their culture. And now, businesses have numerous technological solutions available, allowing them to set goals to preserve sustainability and security of the supply chain. The businesses that now operate in sustainable development conditions and adopting such similar approaches, I'm talking about the reduction of the carbon footprint or the use of environmental friendly vehicles fleet, as well as those aiming at reducing their environmental footprint, will improve and boost their competitiveness and will also reduce their operational expenses. And of course, are going to promote innovation, boosting productivity and increasing their brand awareness. Sustainability matters are a key priority at both political and social, economic and business levels. Mature businesses, apart from regular controls and audits, invest in training and education, as well as suppliers' reward schemes. The businesses that have included sustainability at the core of their operation adopt those activities to areas where they come to buy or sell products and services, and those businesses are also supported by the state. For the next day, what we want? Well, we want to ensure that the risk of society will be limited, and the same will apply to course for businesses. We know that year 2022, certain decisions are expected by the European Commission regarding the management of supply chain in terms of their publication responsibility. As it is known, ladies and gentlemen, in our country, the majority of businesses is represented by small and medium-sized enterprises, and we know that this goes beyond the European definition because sometimes this refers to large businesses or the Greek reality. So comprehensive support is required through the support, basic guidance, as well as implementation of tools that will allow them to opt for the right sustainability policies. At the same time, this design needs to consider key issues about sustainability and resilience of the supply chain. For example, health and safety at the workplace, environmental protection, local societies and businesses, ethical behavior and compliance with regulatory framework and company reputation. We at PASOK have always acknowledged the critical role undertaken by our country, undertaken by these businesses, and we know that farming, fisheries and livestock breeding contributes to ensuring social cohesion, especially in rural areas. It is a standing belief that we want to have a human-friendly production that forms the basis for a sustainable food policy with the use of organic means of production. We want to boost precision method farming in order to reduce the fertilizers administered, and we want to boost certain traditional products, further boost the fertility of our soil and promote an effective waste management system for the relevant units. We also want to ensure that irrigation water will be available to all farmers. Today, this discussion has to do with energy, but we know that water management will be the next upcoming hot topic. And this is why we propose midterm measures such as boosting and enhancing the interconnected systems in order to boost the production based on renewable energy sources. We know that we need to collaborate with farm associations. The farming sector should participate in the greening of all the activities and operations. We want to ensure that pollutions will also be managed in a better way. Carbon sequestration techniques will be further boosted and promoted. We also want to promote the openness of our country in order to promote our products all around the world, and they want them to enjoy the right type and level of support, both in financial and practical terms. We want to ensure the restructuring of all those resources in order to achieve substantial and right utilization of the resources. We want to create an extensive system of small but effective dams in order to restrain superficial water. Those are just a few of the proposals we have. At the same time, we want to criticize the government for all those things. We want to say that for the time being, no discussion is being made about the new CAP with a view to having the disbursement and use, well, you know what use that will be, of the community funds. We know that there's no front-loaded use of the recovery fund that has been disbursed to Greece after the pandemic. I'd like to remind you that the entire primary sector has been seen as a non-affected sector, and we know that today's government is unable to understand and realize the role held by the state for those critical sectors of the economy in order to highlight all those things. The leadership of the Ministry of Rural Development is too introvert to invest in top quality resources in farming, fisheries and livestock breeding. They are unable to look at the right policies that will shield and protect the food security of our country. This is an issue that has emerged after the pandemic and the war in Ukraine. Hopefully, for the time being, we have not experienced the full repercussions of that, but we also need to have policies that will look forward in order to prevent the worst. We need to change our culture and mindset, and this needs to ensure the food security as well as resources protection in order to prevent inequalities in terms of access to basic goods. Our population is shrinking. I'm talking about rural population, and I come from a rural area that back in 2017 was the first region among the European Union regions in terms of specialization. I'm talking about the prefecture of Ilia. I'm afraid that today we no longer have the adequate population to run those things, so we need to better organize the farmers' training and specialization, vocational training systems, because today knowledge does not travel across generations. Knowledge should be provided and the modern means that are currently available, because this requires the modernization of the primary sector, and we all need to rely on that, and we also need to invest in that. And for us at PASOK, this is a key priority. Again, I would like to thank you for extending this invitation. I'm looking forward to listening to the other speakers and the works of this conference. I'm confident that those results and conclusions will support the primary sector and the farming sector, the manufacturing, processing sectors, things that can lead to higher revenue for this country. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Katrinis, for his speech. He mentioned a lot of interesting things, and I'm sure that we will have questions after our Q&A session. Now I would like to ask Mr. Georgios Karakatsanis from Evotropia Ecological Finance Architectures. Mr. Karakatsanis, you have the floor. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, dear organizers of the 5th AgriBusiness Forum. Thank you very much for the invitation and for honoring me to be here with you. Dear Mr. Kalarrytis, today I would like to talk about an issue that it is the great obstacle in realizing circular economy policies, the so-called greenwashing. Greenwashing is a practice according to which you are stating falsely that your product is environmental friendly, or you are adopting illegal practices for waste management. When it comes to our company, we have 3 pillars that we work on. We are specialized in the methods of evaluating of our natural resources, of the digital applications for the industrial symbiosis, which will be the main issue that we are going to talk about. And last but not least, the financial products for the banking sector. I am trying to talk about greenwashing on various levels, and this practice has a lot of applications. Nevertheless, I'm going to talk about waste residue. Plastic waste. I apologize. Is there any technical issue?
Πολύ ωραία. Λοιπόν,
Okay, we will start by mapping this issue, by trying to understand what greenwashing is, where does it come from, its flows, and the legislation around the world. This is the cost of linear economy, which means that we have 2 times of environmental cost, and we can use data from the World Bank to evaluate them in money. First of all, the depletion of natural resources, mainly the petroleum, and you know that petrochemicals are more of the waste, and of course the ecosystem's pollutions. We are not talking about the CO2 emissions, we're talking about microplastics when they are absorbed by the water tanks. All this cost reaches $6.8 trillion, which is 8.1% of the world GDP. Here you can see the tragedy of the commons. Imagine that plastic waste goes to the oceans and then in the international waters. The tragedy of the water commons was a concept introduced by the work of Garrett Harding in the Science magazine, the Science journal. Nevertheless, the phenomenon was described by Thucydides and by Aristotle in his Politics in the second book. There is a new country in the size of Mexico, if you can see, and it is one of the 6 new plastic countries around the globe. Here you can see a report by Interpol trying to learn more about where the global plastic waste goes and which countries have adopted bad practices and allow the plastics to be absorbed by the oceans. You can see that there is a range from 1 to 3 million of plastic waste from China go to the oceans. Since the beginning of the plastic use, since the 1950s, around 400 million tons of plastic waste have been accumulated on the earth that then end up through the food chain in our table, in our meals. A very important point is the Basel Convention in 1989, which tries to talk about the transboundary plastics pollution. It puts emphasis on the marine resources protection, in the prevention of greenwashing, and of course in adopting methods for life cycle standards analysis in order to be taken into considerations in the whole life cycle of the product. And of course, this leads us to another very important issue, the assessment of the environmental cost, which are the methods that we use in order to measure and assess it, and how we are going to incorporate it in the price, because we have heard what is happening with the competition of other countries that use other practices, unethical practices. So, in detail, when we try to understand which is the difference between linear and circular economy, and coming from econometrics, I would like to say that circular economy means that I can keep producing the same values to have the same level of well-being, but with less use of virgin material, virgin raw material. This is the so-called dematerialization, which means that the value per mass is very high, which means that sometimes it is referred to as degrowth. So when it comes to the life cycle analysis, we try to see the 5 stages of the life cycle. First of all, which is the environmental cost of extracting raw materials, then which is the environmental cost of turning them into the product of the processing, which is the cost of delivering them, which is the cost for using it to gain economic utility, and last but not least, what is happening at the end of the life cycle. This incorporates the extended producer's responsibility. A lot of people focus only on a stage of the life cycle in order to show to do the so-called greenwashing. Here you can see a very important legislation, a recommendation at the end of 2021, according to which the product environmental footprint will be a method, an umbrella method for the various methods of the life cycle analysis. It includes a lot of indices, and it does not allow us to focus only on the CO2 emissions. We have new variables such as ecotoxicology, the use of waste resources, the use of land resources, a lot of different parameters, a lot of different variables, which means that every company should have 75 different values in order to assess their environmental footprint. Here you can see that apart from the economic cost, we want to introduce the ecosystems pollution and the resource depletion cost. And if it will be incorporated in the price, we can understand that the producers and the consumers know how much this product has costed, not only when it comes to economic terms, but also in natural resources terms. Let's see some solutions that we have implemented for the traceability and the circular economy. Here you can see the industrial cohabitation, symbiosis. We start from a mechanical sorting, then the waste will go to a recycling factory, and then as in the post-consumer or post-industrial resin will be ready to be reused for other uses. The last directive of the European Union is very important concerning the post-consumer resins that asks for increased traceability. Now, we have to see what is happening when we have a lot of stakeholders in the market and a lot of transactions and a lot of categories, of course, from each family of plastic waste. We have 7 main families, and each of them has maybe 10 sub-families. So you can understand that we have 70 or 100 categories. Here, this is the Symbiotica tool that allows us in plastic resin to understand the content in chlorine, which is something negative, and we also use some other variables, technological innovation, the 5-year average, and this profile can also be personalized and allows us to see the trends of the market. The 3 criteria, the 3 objectives are to achieve the highest commercial value, the lowest environmental impact, and with the maximum transparency. We analyze 3 levels. We analyze on a qualitative level, which is the plastic waste per family and per category. We analyze the prices, what is happening with the recycled resin prices, and last but not least, what is happening in the environmental assessment level for all the 5 stages of the life cycle. Here you can see a screen print from a real case study of a large food industry that we wanted to see the product environmental footprint of its industrial resin, plastic packaging that were not marketable, and they have to be recycled in order to contain liquids. Here you can see their assessment for all 5 stages of the life cycle, as well as where the company is compared to its competitors. So they can do a supplier's evaluation, who is the best supplier, who is the most effective supplier, and to achieve the best possible supply, not only on economic but also on environmental terms. And here you can say that if one has such a tool and is traceable, one can optimize and see that part of this raising could be supplied in the best possible quality, one in a medium quality and one in a worse quality, because one could supply low quality raisin because you cannot find your best possible supplier and you have to opt for someone else. This is a real-time market that has got a very high potential. And all this information, all those mathematical models and the qualitative analysis is happening because we are going to reach a level that the consumer will use their mobile phone, will be able to scan a QR code, the product that they are buying, and based on that they can see the environmental footprint of the plastic packaging of that product and then to decide if they want to buy it or not. You understand that it could have huge effects for a company, not only for the marketing, but also for their brand and for the value of its share if it is not environmental friendly. And last but not least, I'm going to talk about the ecological banking paradigm shift. Right now, banks want to lead to control a lot of capitals to the circular economy, but they don't know what to measure. And of course, greenwashing makes things even worse. We can say that when it comes to the Basel Convention, the one about banking regulatory framework and about the decisions of the European Banking Authority, according to which from January 1st, 2022, there is the so-called green asset ratio established, which means that this green asset ratio comes from the comparison with the total assets. And in order to achieve a high credit rating, this bank would assess every possible investment, would be able to see which are the suppliers of the person asking for the loan, and then they would be able to assess it and make sure that the fundings that they give would comply with the GAR requirements. So, apart from the traceability of the plastic packaging, there is also a silo effect, if you wish.
Στην εφοδιαστική αλυσίδα που είναι πάρα πολύ σημαντικό κομμάτι.
So last but not least, allow me to say that especially when it comes to the regenerative agriculture, we will have the first applications. We had the chance to receive funding from the European Commission about a research program, and by that will last rather for 36 months with a total budget of more than 2 million euros. We have 10 countries participating, all the South European Mediterranean countries, Spain, Italy, Morocco, Algeria, Egypt, Portugal, and we have taken up the econometrical analysis of those farms, of the regenerative farms, and we are trying to see the structural change econometrics. Let's say that from traditional practices, which will be the effects to the revenues of the farmers, which if the relationships of the members of the family will change, and we are going also to see the farm-to-fork product environmental footprint, and last but not least, we will have the first pilot for making a first financing tool that will be tailored for the micro-funding for regenerative agriculture small farms. Thank you very much for your attention. I am at your disposal for any kind of question or remark.
Thank you so much, Mr. Karakatsanis, for this highly comprehensive and inclusive presentation. Mr. Dimitrios Vlachos, you have the floor. I would like to thank you. I would like to thank the organizers for extending this invitation. It's with great pleasure that I participate in this fifth Agribusiness Forum. I have attended and participated in all the previous organizations. Today, I'm here to talk about circular economy, despite the fact that my main topic of concern has to do with supply chain mainly, especially in terms of the digital supply chain. The head of the Parliamentary Group and the previous speaker has already mentioned some things. I'm here wearing the hat of a professor at the Aristotle University of Salonica, and I'm also the president of the Logistics Association of Northern Greece. It is a scientific association aiming at promoting issues faced by the supply chain sector. Well, I'm here to start by setting the framework of sustainability, and I will try to present a survey we carried out in northern Greece about the extent of implementation of circular economy measures by the Greek agri-food businesses. Let's start from the top. I'm here to talk about food. That's the goal of this conference. Our goal here is what? To feed the people, to provide consumers with food that is safe, affordable, and of the quality and diversity they expect. And on the other hand, we also need to meet the goals and the needs of society. I'm talking about the economic, environmental, and social needs. This is the current sustainability framework. Which are the problems that we try to address? There are issues that have to do with soil of the land, things that have to do with climate and environment. In the first session today, these things have already been discussed. We need to address water, energy, and other issues. And of course, we also have the urbanization, which is another topic that is linked to supply chain and logistics. I would like to move forward. I don't want to bore you too many details about that. And we have a prompt response. When we talk about food, what do we include? We include the aspect of the perishability of the food, so we want to protect them. And we have also included concepts such as the environmental carbon footprint, the nutritional value. Well, when it comes to circular economy, everyone has talked about that. I'm talking about the linear model. This has led us to a model where everything is recycled and moving all around the world, but you can see that the graph on the side is indicative of the linear economy, the recycling economy, and the circular economy model. The difference has to do with the waste that is produced. In the first case, we have too much waste. In the second case, we try to recycle material. In the third case, we try to produce the minimum amount of waste possible. Another difference, or rather the key difference between circular economy and recycling has to do with the fact that one of them is a business model. It is a strategy, a design that starts from the concept of the products and the services rather than on the need to do something with the outcomes and the byproducts of the process. Let's move forward. What should we expect in that system? Well, we need to change consumers' behavior. We need to realize that sustainability is a profit center for small and medium-sized enterprises. We need to consider collaboration at the local level. And of course, we need to provide financial support. That's the end of my introduction. Let's move forward now with the results of the survey. This is a survey that was carried out in the context of an Interreg project about Greece and Bulgaria. So this survey was carried out in northern Greece, and particular at the regions that are neighboring with other regions in Bulgaria. The goal of the survey has been to capture the status quo of the circular economy practices in northern Greece, and we want to see which are the different types of the companies that consider these issues, what extent of their operation has to do with circular economy. Here you can see a standard slide showing the design and the timeline of the survey. It was carried out 1 year ago. It was completed in spring 2022. This is a survey that included more than 200 companies. Actually, 200 people responded, not 200 companies, says the speaker. So we talk about companies that are located in northern Greece. When it comes to the size of the company, well, we try to address the profile that the MP mentioned before, small and medium-sized businesses. And here you can see the turnover. Sometimes we had companies with turnover of less than 1 million. But on the other hand, we had companies representing all aspects of supply chain, we had production, packing, processing, logistics, trading, and service provision. The first thing that we recorded was the main thing that has to do with circular economy. Of course, I'm talking about recyclable waste. That's something known, no particular findings there. But on the other hand, when we asked about whether the strategy is aligned with becoming more circular, one might say, but do those businesses or such businesses have a model? Well, the answer, as expected in the vast majority of companies, is no. It's something that they haven't even considered. They do things because they copy some other company practices. It's not a conscientious choice. This is discouraging, actually. Now, when it comes to the active involvement of companies in generic circular economy measures, these things have to do with recycling of waste. In some other cases, they try to reuse and recycle the inputs. That's a good or interesting thing. This is a rather poor chart. Markedly red are the companies that are actually implementing a relevant measure, and the companies that are interested in implementing such measures are marked in orange. Another similar chart has to do with the energy-related circular economy measures. We see that the only thing they're doing is to monitor the energy consumption, and I take it that is something that is done, or it is something easily monitored through their PPC bills. All the other things rank very low. When it comes to water-related circular economy measures, things are even worse there. Only a handful of businesses try to implement some of the known water-saving measures. I believe that that's indicative of the big picture. Now, environmental impact assessment. 30% of businesses said yes, they do assess the environmental impact of their operations. I'm not sure whether this happens. Maybe it's one of those questions, you know, that when it's yes or no, you say, let's go for yes, and if they ask to elaborate, we will figure out something to say. That's what we thought. The last of the questions I have included in this presentation has to do with who exerts pressure on the companies in order for them to implement such measures. The customers put pressure on the companies to undertake action. And another thing has to do with pressure exerted by the suppliers. Well, we see there is such a trend, but of course, since we talk about the entire supply chain, not all customers are the same. We're not talking about consumers or retail customers. We also have intermediate chains or a supermarket, because they do put pressure on the suppliers for such actions, because you do realize that supermarkets are larger businesses than the suppliers, so they require more things. And now some correlations, which I believe are very interesting, but some of them were rather expected. In general, companies with comparatively more employees and higher annual revenues appear to be associated with higher prioritization of circular economy concepts, and of course they do measure what they do, because they are implementing something and they want to measure it in order to see what the impact is. Apparently, those are what we call a healthy business. But that's my personal conclusion. And the companies that do something are the companies that receive pressure by their customers or suppliers. So, in order to near the completion of my presentation, I would like to share with you the conclusions. This survey confirmed the image that we have in our mind. Because we tend to say things, not all of us understand them, maybe politicians and people who promote the European Commission policies might do so, but I don't think that the average person considers that, because people have different incentives, and maybe at this point it would be interesting to mention what Mr. Karakatsanis said before. We need to consider the overall cost. If we measure the cost, we can tell whether circular economy is considered to be more expensive, more difficult to begin with, but someone should come up with the final conclusion, the final outcome, in order to see whether this is profitable or not. Okay, it's all doom and gloom. Well, I don't think so. I don't want to say that, because it's something that we were expecting. And we know that all those things happen at research level, meaning that it is too difficult and it takes too much time and high investments that are related to circular economy in order to meet the goals. I'm talking about investments in the neoplastics sector. This bio-based economy falls within the scope of the European Commission's goals, and all those things call for extensive investment in order to be viable and sustainable. But it takes some time to do that. This cannot happen overnight. On a more optimistic note, and like the previous speaker talked about industrial symbiosis, which is a European trend, it emerged in Denmark, because I believe that most of the investments started happening there. We have too many industries at the same place, and the input of one industry is the output of another industry. So, in essence, they manage the waste internally. So maybe that could be the traditional model of traditional economy. Mr. Michailidis talked about that. And we had someone who had a flock, and the waste produced by the animals was used by the farmers as a fertilizer, so that was a circle. Maybe it would be quicker for us to consider such solutions applicable on a local level rather than opting for the large scale solutions, because they need to be tested and mature enough to be implemented. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your presentation, which I'm sure that will give birth to a lot of questions. Let me ask with a question to you, dear Professor, regarding the disruption of the supply chain, which started from the pandemic, and the situation is even now worse due to the energy crisis and due to the military/geopolitical crisis. Do you believe that the normalcy is back in the supply chain? Or when do you believe that the cost will come back to normal values, so to say? Unfortunately, we had back-to-back crises. And as you have mentioned, the two recent crises, the pandemic and the war, the situation is still fluid. The prices seem to differentiate, seem to vary. I'm talking generally about the supply chains. The shipment, the containers costs have been reduced now, but no one can say with certainty that the situation is really different, that we are going towards a kind of normalcy, and that we will not have any other factors, any other crisis that will redistribute the cards. During the last 2 years, we have learned that we have to change a model, yet again, an economy model, and it is related to what I have also mentioned. And it is related to the local economies. The resilience of the supply chains is, of course, desirable, and the first solution would be do it local, do it short, because the larger the supply chain, the more the problems. So the disruption to the supply chain and the increased cost and the operation, you believe that it is going to reshape the economy? Yes, I agree. Now a question to Mr. Karakatsanis and you both. You have described a situation in the near future when the consumer will be able to scan a QR code and check the environmental footprint of the product, and based on that to choose. Amidst the financial crisis, when people have less income and they have to choose between economy, between buying and between being environmental friendly, you understand that if people do not have a lot of money, they will not be so environmental conscious. They will go for cheaper products. Thank you, Mr. Kalarrytis, for that question. It is a very good question. This mindset is more static, so to say. because we have to bear in mind that when we are going to introduce those practices, traceability practices, that at the end of the day, they relate to an economic cost. A lot of jobs are creating, a lot of scientific methods are created, new professions have been created, and it is an economic accelerator. We have to understand the added value and the new professions that will be created based on circular economy. Right now, if one had to choose tomorrow, if they want to pay an increased cost because that incorporates the traceability, they wouldn't do that. And that does not happening only in Europe and only in countries with high incomes. It is happening mainly in the low-income countries. And this is what Kuznets talk about, that the great issue that is happening regarding the depletion of natural resources is taking place at low-income countries, the survival economies, and such economies are the Nigeria economy. Well, they have a lot of issues with oil extraction and they have no environmental rules in place. Even in the region of China, apart from the urban cities, the urban centers, and this was announced by Interpol, they have created plastic waste cemeteries. We need time in order to have energy transition, and circular economy also needs time in order to adopt those measures and to create the relevant professions that will bring about new income. Due to the financial crisis and since Europe will experience economic pressure, it is estimated that in 2023 will be a year of crisis when it comes to the cost of life. So on the short term, the green agenda in Europe will be harmed, because when societies are experiencing inflation, experiencing increase of the rates, you understand that when people have less income, they will reprioritize their needs. There was a reference for the need of adopting green practices by small and medium and big businesses alike. You understand that this is a political issue. A lot of businesses, and I'm not talking about big businesses, about medium and small businesses, SMEs, and of course I'm talking about the relevant businesses in Greece, we have two questions to answer, and they are very difficult to be answered. SMEs ask how and how much it will cost to me, because it is a political issue, raising awareness. What should that business do and how much it will cost, and if that cost can be partly be taken up by the state. A very good question, Mr. Kalarrytis, and we have understood that 2023 will be a year of recession, and that, of course, will affect the Greek economy, since a large part of the Greek economy is based on services, and more specifically on tourism. Your question reminds me to the situation that we have experienced during the financial crisis, when people heard the word reform, tried to understand what does this mean when it comes to cost in their daily lives, because reforms and reformations were combined with very difficult, painful decisions. So, the same might very well happen with the green agenda, with this green transition towards the circular economy. It is in our priorities, but it should take place in a sustainable manner. we have to take into consideration the primary sector, and of course, the state should take a look into the tools that they have. I'm talking about the funds from the Recovery Fund, or the new program for farming growth, and the funds from the NSRF. But however, there is the reality. As Mr. Karakatsanis and Vlachos have mentioned earlier, they have tried to talk on a scientific level that large part of the entrepreneurship and the processing in the primary sector do not have information. They haven't yet understood the necessity towards this direction. The banking system may prioritize that or may use it as a criteria in order for businesses to take credit. And how is it possible, since a large part of the industry is now transferred outside the European Union? A large part of the chemicals are now imported because third countries do not have environmental requirements. So we have to also to take in mind the survival of the industry. So by having realistic time plans in place, and this is when we disagree with the agenda that was rather quickly issued without taking into consideration the particularities of the country, but also the energy situation as it was shaped. I'm talking about the time period before the war in Ukraine. So we have to take a look at the funding tools in order to allow SMEs to become competitive in an environment, in a world environment with new standards, with new requirements. And of course, we understand that we should look forward. We cannot set the time back. This discussion is fruitful. And then politicians should listen to the scientific community and set a new framework informed by the reality that our farmers experience. Because we cannot talk about smart farming when half our regions do not even have basic interconnectivity. We cannot discuss logistics when we don't have the requirements in place that would allow us to be interconnected with other networks. We cannot talk about transition towards the new era when the largest part of SMEs are excluded from funding tools. So we have to revisit the situation that will understand the reality and will try to pave some roads for some of the recipients, of the possible recipients.
Professor Gemtos, would you like to say something? But allow me to ask a final question, because Mr. Karakatsanis talked about how we can see or take stock of the financial capital and the resources available in a country. You talked about whether companies have waste management plans. I realize that although in Greece we're not being faced with water shortage, it is being wasted. And if someone has visited Israel and if they have seen the spraying techniques they have in place there, you can realize that they were able to transform desert into an orchard. So if this non-use or waste of natural capital is something that is actually happening, how can we indeed take stock of the financial loss that stems from that, and whether if we're able to take stock of that, or the fact, for example, that we don't use water right, forest right, etc., maybe there is also an actual accounting loss in terms of our GDP. So is it feasible to take an actual stock of the loss due to maluse or misuse of the environment? Yes, it's true. Efforts are being undertaken. I cannot tell you for sure about whether something happens for water. Or someone might say that we try to take stock of all the externalities, the various costs that might not be seen as being paid, but we are indeed paying them through some other account. That might also be an answer to another question. We know that there are hidden costs, costs that citizens cannot perceive. At some point, they are just paying the bill without realizing that what they have just paid is linked to an absence of circular economy, actions to misuse of water resources. For example, we might wonder, why do we have increased the water bills? Well, it's normal when we keep wasting water. But this is not actually linked to that, because the increase might be perceived as a few years later. This is what it is all about. We need to measure all these things, and this needs to be measured by the state, universities, or state bodies. And we need to inform citizens about those hidden external costs, are they called. And that might also provide an actual incentive. And I must say that the community has carried out such an extensive research on logistics, but I don't know what happens in the case of water. That's why I mentioned that before. But there is a long-standing survey about logistics in terms of accidents caused due to those transports, and those things are mentioned in terms of numbers and figures, and that's an actual number that says something, that is indicative of something. Mr. Karakatsanis. Well, I believe that that's a wonderful question. It lies at the heart of all issues. For example, when it has to do with natural capital. And I would like to thank the professor for giving this answer. Well, in a way, when we say that there are hidden costs that consumers pay without realizing it, one thinks of, let's say, healthcare costs due to hormone disturbances from the consumption of microplastics. When it comes to the natural capital, right now, we, as a sector, try to take stock of the value of the services of the ecosystem, talking about biomass and the way in which ecosystems collaborate in order to clean up water, biodiversity, genetic information, and we know that there are methods trying to attribute value to that. Our competitive edge is the following. We account for 3% of European Union's territory, but we have 40% of the European biodiversity represented in Greece, and some species are found only in Greece. So it means that pollution in Greece matters more compared to another country. And I would like to talk about a study that's sometimes been ignored. It's the Dimitra study back in 2015 that tried to take stock of the value of forest ecosystems. It has been published, and there was also a Greek official gazette saying that all the other studies that will consider the value of the forest system should follow this particular methodology. It was in collaboration with the Aristotle University of Salonica, and I'm afraid that we have not mapped the natural capital in our seas. But of course, this is also linked to the zone of exclusive exploitation. However, when it comes to the previous question as well, we know that there are some costs that consumers might pay. And we also have environmental benefits that citizens enjoy, because we talk about natural capital. It is a natural wealth, and all the citizens participate there. Of course, that's a rather ambitious plan, and there is an ongoing discussion linking that with a minimum guaranteed income. Now, when it comes to water resources, in order to be more specific, from what I see, Mr. Kalarrytis, you talk about the diversion of Achelos River as well as the dam of Mesochora that has been the subject of 7 decisions by the Council of State, and its overall cost was approximately 500 million euro. And this sum has been disbursed for over the past years because they thought that it couldn't generate hydroelectric energy. The diversion of Achelos River, without going into the details about whether it was a technically correct and sound project, because we have evidence supporting both sides, I believe this is a rather positive project because diversion of Achelos will provide water to Pinios, because in the upcoming 5 years, Pinios might go dry, entirely dry. So you do realize that this is something that will further boost our natural capital. And on the one hand, we have the perplexing heating costs for farmers in Thessaly, for example. The more they irrigate, the more they extract water from underground waters, you do realize that you need to dig deeper. And we also have the problem of seawater entering the underground aquifer, and that's something that needs to be regulated. And we try to keep them as a backup solution in case of drought, like the one we were faced with back in 1993. So the deeper you dig to draw from the aquifers, the more energy you consume, and this means that you enter a vicious circle. The deeper you dig, the more energy you need to consume in order to draw and extract this water. So the diversion of the Achelos River would allow us to refill the aquifer and clean them up from the various contaminants from fertilizers. And apparently this will also upgrade the Pinios ecosystem that will go dry if nothing happens, and it will also reduce the operational cost of the farmers. Right now, this might account for 50% of their cost and another 25% by the increased cost of fertilizer. This is what that's the impact for the typical average farmer in Thessaly. And at the same time, we need to realize what's the financial outcome in euros, in figures, from such a project for the upgrade of the natural capital of the country. Thank you so much for those clarifications. I would also like to thank all the 3 speakers, Mr. Vlachos, Mr. Karakatsanis, Mr. Katrinis, and Mr. Bagalakakis, for this 2-day forum. Now we'll have a 30-minute coffee break, and we'll be back in 30 minutes with the next chapter.